out. Look deeply into the mirror.
Some see heroes, others only heroes. We see the era.
Hey y'all doing random things? Watch some videos and I'll do a reading later.
The future of money to others.
Some of them are interesting.
The end of jobs, or the end of income. We see the endless funds fueling the AI hype. While others follow the noise, we follow the money.
Look deeply into the mirror. Who is looking back at you? Society tells you it is a flawed human being. Religions tell you it is a sinner, an entity born in debt, separated from the divine, begging for salvation. But what if the greatest secret in human history is that the face staring back at you is the face of the ultimate creator? If you want to see what God looks like, you simply have to look in the mirror. You are looking him straight in the face. For millennia, humanity has been trapped in a cycle of fear, limitation, and a desperate search for answers outside of itself. We look to the sky, to religious institutions, to ancient texts, and to gurus, begging for a God to save us. But what if everything you have ever been taught about God, heaven, hell, karma, and your own identity is completely backwards? Today we are diving into one of the most profound, paradigm-shifting, and controversial esoteric teachings of the modern era. The White Book, featuring the teachings of an entity known as RANDOMMM, channeled exclusively through an American woman named J.C. Knight. RANDOMMM claims to be an ancient being who conquered the physical world and ascended into a state of pure light over 35,000 years ago. Through these teachings, he brings a singular, staggering message. You are not a victim of circumstance. You are not a physical body. You are an immortal, sovereign creator. You are literally God. To understand this, we must first understand the origins of the teacher. According to the text, RANDOMMM lived 35,000 years ago as a Lemurian in the slums of a late Atlantean society. He was a man who knew profound suffering, watching his mother and sister die from starvation and disease, oppressed by an intellectually arrogant empire. Consumed by hatred, he became a fearsome barbarian warrior, leading a massive army to conquer 3/4 of the known world, driven by a desire to exact vengeance on the tyrants of Atlantis. But RANDOMMM's greatest victory was not on the battlefield. It was his conquest of himself. After being brutally impaled by a sword and left to heal, he spent years observing the natural world, the sun, the moon, the wind, and the birds. He realized that the unknown God of his ancestors was not a deity hiding behind the clouds, nor a judgmental being created by the twisted minds of men. He discovered that the unknown God was the very life force pulsing through everything. The evening sky, the scent of jasmine, the river, and the wind. Fascinated by the wind, its absolute freedom, its immortality, its boundless power, he decided he wanted to become it. Through years of relentless focus and absolute determination, he learned to raise the vibratory frequency of his physical body, transforming matter into pure light, and eventually ascended, taking his physical body with him into eternity. Now he returns not to be worshipped, but to teach humanity the very science of ascension and self-realization. He returns to remind you of what you have forgotten, your inherent divinity. If you are God, then what are the religious institutions teaching? RANDOMMM's teachings completely dismantle the traditional dogmas that have ruled human civilization. He states unequivocally that a judging, punishing, wrathful God has never existed anywhere except in the hearts that lacked love. He brought the supreme gift of love to this plane, but he openly taught that the Father lived within everyone. Jeshua liberated himself from human illusions and fully expressed the God within, thus becoming Christ. The word Christ simply means the God-man, a human fully expressing God, and God fully expressing through a human. Anyone who realizes they are God and lives that truth is Christ. The tragedy of history is that his message was distorted. Jeshua never claimed to be your personal savior. He became his own savior by understanding his divine source, and he taught others to do the same, famously stating that the kingdom of heaven is within you. To comprehend your divinity, you must understand the true genesis of the universe. This is not the story of a man in the sky building the earth with his hands. In the beginning there was no form. There was only an infinite, silent void of thought. The ultimate supreme intelligence, the Father. God was this vast, formless space of thought, and God would have remained formless forever if he had not done one thing. He contemplated himself. When the infinite thought turned inward and contemplated its own existence, the sheer act of contemplation caused the thought to expand. The void folded in on itself in an act of profound self-love and expanded into a magnificent, radiant light. You were born in that exact moment. Every single one of you was a direct creation of that first contemplative thought. You were born as individual sparks of light, gods created from God, an extension of the divine mind given the ultimate gift, free will. God the Father gave you this free will so that you could take his infinite substance, thought, and creatively expand it into new forms, ensuring that the universe would continue to evolve for eternity. As beings of light, you possessed staggering intelligence. You were the architects of the cosmos. You took the high-frequency energy of light and lowered its vibration, condensing it into electromagnetism, and then condensing it even further into dense matter. You created the suns, the planets, the stars. Millions of years ago, you came to this emerald planet called Earth. You designed the flora and fauna, shaping living organisms out of gases and water. But as beings of pure light, you couldn't physically interact with your creations. You could flow through a tree like the wind, but you could not feel its bark or smell a flower's fragrance, because your frequency was too high to interact with dense matter. So, to experience the physical paradise you had created, you designed a vehicle, the human body. You engineered this magnificent biological machine to house your soul and be surrounded by the Spirit of God. It was designed with a program that allowed you to continually upgrade, enabling you to live and coexist in a challenging and dangerous environment. Every thought you embraced emotionally was recorded in every cell, so that the memory of your experiences could be passed on through each successive incarnation. Through this body, you could finally touch a flower, inhale its essence, and preserve forever within the soul the emotion born from that experience. You could look at a tree, truly see it, delight in its scent, and marvel at its beauty. Through the human form, you could see one another, touch, embrace, and communicate. You could nourish yourselves, observe one another, and engage with each other in ways that were unpredictable and alive. By entering matter the eternal gods immersed themselves deeper into physical existence, they began to identify solely with the body. You forgot that you were the immortal creator inside the machine. As you identified with flesh, you became subject to the fears of the flesh. The limitless power of your thought became restricted by the fear of death, scarcity, and judgment. This limitation caused the physical body to degrade, age, and die. When your body died, you realized you were still alive in a realm of light. But because your consciousness was still obsessed with the physical world and trapped in altered, limited beliefs, you eagerly returned to a new body. Thus began the endless cycle of reincarnation. You have lived thousands of lives on this plane. You have been kings and beggars, conquerors and slaves, men and women of every race and religion. You have played every role in the theater of life. Over centuries, religious and societal programming deepened your amnesia, teaching you that you were born flawed, sinful, and separate from God. You surrendered your sovereign power to priests, politicians, and societal norms. Today, you call yourself a human being and view yourself as a victim of fate, luck, or an angry deity. But beneath the mask of your humanity, hiding behind your eyes, is the supreme creator of universes.
It feels like a certain kind of magic. Maybe it's the Australian sun, or how the sky is always a shade of blue.
Extra confidence from a green plan. Extra attention from our people. Extra is our ordinary at Regents.
If you dare to be a pizza pro, the new stove make pizza mode from Frigidaire is all you. Just one of 15 plus cooking modes. It's dough to done in 2 minutes. If you dare to bring more flavor to the table, dare to expect more from your oven. Frigidaire.
At Chamberlain University, we know nurses are at the heart of the Houston community, and that competence and compassion go hand in hand. We know that camaraderie is the secret language of freedom. That celebration is from a witness that didn't use, and we know because for over 135 years, we've been preparing nurses in Houston, not just to meet the moment, but to own it. Chamberlain University belongs to something great.
How exactly do you, as God, create your reality right now? Ramtha explains this through the profound spiritual biology of the human body. Everything in your life is materialized through your thoughts. You are not a victim of accidents or coincidences. Every circumstance has been imagined and brought to life by your own feelings and beliefs. Here is the mechanics of how reality is forged. Your physical body is surrounded by a brilliant electromagnetic light field called the aura, which is the spirit of your being. This spirit is directly connected to the river of thought or the mind of God. In every second of your existence, thoughts from the infinite consciousness pass through your aura. However, your brain is merely a receiver, much like a radio. You only receive the thoughts that match the frequency of your current mindset. Because humanity is trapped in social consciousness, a dense, slow, fear-based frequency focused on survival, money, aging, and what others think. Your brain only allows these limited thoughts to enter. When a thought enters your brain, it is converted into a high-voltage electrical current. This current is amplified by the pineal gland, the sixth seal, and sent down your central nervous system to every single cell in your body. As this electrical thought hits your cells, it produces a physical sensation called emotion. Your soul, which resides near your heart, acts as a cosmic recording device. The soul doesn't record words or pictures, it records emotions. Once an emotion is recorded in the soul, it creates a magnetic expectation in your aura. This magnetic field then literally draws circumstances, people, and events into your life. exact same emotion. If you dwell on thoughts of lack, your body feels the emotion of poverty. Your soul records it, and you magnetize financial struggle. If you constantly think about sickness and aging, your cells receive those low-frequency electrical instructions, and your body begins to die. But if you can accept the unlimited thought that you are God, that you are worthy, that you are infinite joy, that thought will send a brilliant, high-frequency electrical spark through your nervous system. Your body will feel absolute ecstasy and unbridled power. Your soul will record this divine emotion, and your aura will instantly magnetize miracles, healing, and limitless abundance into your life. The only thing stopping you from absolute mastery is your alter ego, the analytical, survival-driven part of your brain that rejects any thought that doesn't fit into the safe, boring box of society. The alter ego is what ancient texts metaphorically called the Antichrist, because it denies the God within you. The Battle of Armageddon is not a future physical war. It is the internal struggle happening right now in your mind, between the limited alter ego and the awakening Christ consciousness within. Most human beings use only 1/3 of their brain. The rest lies dormant, waiting for you to entertain thoughts outside the boundaries of normal human logic. When you declare, "I am God," and allow unlimited thoughts to enter, your pituitary gland, the seventh seal, begins to bloom like a magnificent flower. It releases hormones that awaken the sleeping parts of your brain. If you were to use your entire brain, you could instantly heal any disease, regrow limbs, or change your body into pure light to live forever. Ramtha states that physical death is merely an illusion, an accepted societal program. Your body was originally designed by the gods to live for hundreds of thousands of years, maintained by the endocrine system. It only dies because you expect it to die, because you stop producing the hormones of life and activate the death hormone out of guilt, self-judgment, and societal programming. If you eliminate the word old age from your vocabulary and replace it with eternity, if you stop celebrating birthdays that merely count your degradation, you can reverse aging. You can command your soul to restore the enzymes of youth to your body simply by changing your attitude. Ascension, the act of raising your body's frequency so high that it becomes invisible light, bypassing death completely, is your ultimate destiny, just as it was Ramtha's. So, if you are an immortal God, what is the purpose of this physical life? People desperately seek a grand mission. They consult psychics, astrologers, and religious texts, hoping to find their destiny. Ramtha's answer is radically simple, yet completely disruptive to the ego. Your purpose is simply to live. You didn't come here to save the world. You didn't come here to pay off karmic debts from past lives. You came here to experience the emotions of the physical realm, to turn the unknown into the known, and to gather the pearls of wisdom that only come through experience. Everything you have ever done in this life and in your past lives, whether society deemed it saintly or horrific, was done simply to gain understanding. There is no failure in the mind of God. Every mistake, every tear, every moment of despair was a step towards self-realization. The experiences you judge as bad provided the friction necessary to create profound wisdom in your soul. Therefore, you must stop drowning in guilt. Guilt is the chain that binds you to the cycle of reincarnation. Forgiveness of yourself is the ultimate divine act. When you forgive yourself, you sever the illusion of karma. Karma only exists if you believe you must be punished. In the truth of God, there are no ledgers, no judges, and no executioners. The reality is ending, and the age of light, the era of God, is dawning. This is a time when humanity will awaken from its collective slumber and realize that the kingdom of heaven has been inside them all along. You have been playing a game of limitation for 10.5 million years. It is time to wake up. Don't wait for a savior to descend from the clouds. Be the savior of your own mind. Stop giving your power away to dogmas, to the opinions of others, to the fear of aging, and to the illusion of time. Claim your sovereignty. Say to yourself, I know I am God, and watch as the universe bends to validate your realization. Ramtha promises us this. One morning, you will wake up in the quiet stillness before dawn. You will look out your window at the velvet sky, watching the stars fade as a spectacular array of lavender, pink, and golden light pierces the horizon. You will hear the sweet song of a bird greeting the day, and in that moment of profound, breathtaking beauty, an electric realization will surge through your entire being. You will realize that you are the sunrise. You are the singing bird. You are the golden light. You are the eternal observer who brought it all into existence. You will look at the majesty of the morning and say, Behold God, which I am. You will never be the same again. The illusions of the world will fall away, and you will step into the infinite continuum of your own divine eternity. So go out into the world. Take off your shoes. Feel the wind. Love yourself relentlessly. And remember, whenever you contemplate love, look to the wind and know that the unknown God is simply you, waiting to be remembered. Subscribe, like, and share if you are ready to claim your divine power. Let us know in the comments, what illusion are you letting go of today?
Give your table new life with 50% off spring at Hobby Lobby. Choose the colors and details that fit the moment and watch your table become the centerpiece of every occasion. Shop 50% off spring at Hobby Lobby.
Genius, I need a financial plan.
I have your new budget and financial plan ready.
I just moved. Why is this so high?
Found a lower plan. You'll save $35 a month. We'll switch now.
Yes. I'm finding the espresso machine under 300.
Done.
Done. I transferred 300 from my savings to my checking.
Done.
Done.
artist Aleister Crowley was undoubtedly one of the most notorious, controversial, and respected men of his era, all in equal measure. A person who captivated many with his writings and enchanting personality, and who was prepared to seek out knowledge of all kinds throughout his rich and experienced life. He was also, and continues to be, at the center of a storm that argues that one of his occult rituals, or more specifically, an attempted reproduction of it by two of his followers just before his death, resulted in a wave of UFO sightings and alien abductions that would begin shortly after. Was a portal open using ancient rituals that led to these strange crafts and unsettling entities entering into our world? Crowley had claimed to have communicated with entities from other realms on several previous occasions. In Shanghai in 1906, for example, he would attempt to summon his holy guardian angel, Iwas, and would do so with the assistance of Elaine Simpson, another renowned occultist and medium, and a person who it is claimed Crowley had contacted through astral means, literally psychic meetings, on several occasions. On April the 20th, 1906, in Simpson's temple, he seemingly succeeded in this communication, writing years later that his guide appeared from an astral plane, enveloped in a fantastic blue and carrying a strange wand. It is said that during this appearance, Simpson offered to Crowley that this spirit had followed him for some time. Without a doubt, though, the most intriguing and perhaps unsettling sessions occurred between January and March 1918 in the furnished rooms of the Central Park West Hotel in New York. The sessions themselves are referred to as the Alamantra working, and featured Crowley using ancient incantations that would ultimately open a portal to another realm of existence. From this portal, an entity known as Lam would communicate directly with him. Crowley would produce a detailed sketch of this creature, a sketch that Crowley claimed he produced while looking at the entity in the flesh. And it is a picture that is one of the most thought-provoking pieces of artwork in recent history. Even the most skeptical of people would have to admit, retrospectively years later, that its appearance was remarkably similar to how we perceive grey aliens to be in our modern world. And we should remember that this sketch was produced almost 30 years before the Roswell crash and the start of the modern UFO era, and almost half a century before this perception really took hold in the public consciousness. How can it be that Crowley produced such an image that most of us would instantly recognize as a grey alien, so long before such a depiction was a part of our collective reality? Might the interdimensional creature, Lam, that Crowley was communicating with, be what we would call a grey alien today? And might this offer clues as to the true nature of these apparent extraterrestrials? In the decades that followed, a cult of sorts named the Cult of Lam grew out of Crowley's followers around these interdimensional communication sessions. Many of Crowley's subsequent followers would attempt their own communication with this entity from another dimension, and over the course of these communication attempts, Lam was considered to be a race of entity as opposed to an individual being. Could this be true? Is Lam not simply a sole entity, but a race of entities from another world? And might we know these entities as grey aliens today? Is this a case of modern folklore being written in real time, or might this knowledge be the result of continued communication between these interdimensional beings and Crowley's followers? Unfortunately, Crowley himself would not elaborate on what was spoken of between himself and Lam during these communication sessions. They remain, however, some of the most intriguing events on record, especially when we turn our attention to two of Crowley's followers who would attempt their own communication sessions just short of 20 years later. In January 1946 in Pasadena, California, Jack Parsons and L. Ron Hubbard would proceed with their own rituals in an attempt to recreate those of Crowley's in the Central Park West Hotel. And according to their own writings, these rituals were a success, and they did indeed manage to open a portal. It is perhaps interesting to note that both men would go on to have successful but extremely different lives following these sessions. Parsons would start what would become
The Jet Propulsion Laboratory, an organization at the cutting edge of technology, unleashed space travel technology. Albert, on the other hand, would begin the Scientology movement. Many have wondered whether the inspiration, influence, and subsequent success of both men and their endeavors is because of their communication with entities from other worlds during these sessions in the mid-1940s. To some, though, the topic of debate was not whether the amateur occultists had managed to open a portal with which to communicate with interdimensional beings, but whether they managed to close it correctly or not. And according to some researchers, they didn't. This failure to securely close the portal allowed permanent access to our world to those who resided in this other realm. Might this apparent failure to close the portal then have seemingly opened have resulted in all manner of entities and their flying craft coming into our world? Is it merely a coincidence that the UFO sightings began, many of them in the United States, in the years immediately following these sessions? Admittedly, this is pure speculation, an intriguing speculation nonetheless, especially when we remind ourselves once again of the sketch of land and how similar it was to a great alien being. It's also interesting to note that the location of the Roswell crash in Roswell, New Mexico, sits along the 33rd parallel, a line of latitude that has numerous paranormal encounters associated with it. The location of the ritual session performed by Parsons and Hubbard in Pasadena resides close to that, just off the 34th parallel. If this portal was left open by Parsons and Hubbard, does it remain open today? If this is the case, is there anyone so adept at occult knowledge as Aleister Crowley undoubtedly was not able to close it? And might this open portal explain a plethora of UFO sightings, as well as encounters with alien entities and even Bigfoot creatures that have swept through the United States and indeed the world since the late 1940s? And as well as the Roswell crash along this line of latitude, several other claims of downed UFOs exist here also, like this apparent open gateway B to Lane. If there is a connection between these portals that has apparently been opened by Crowley and then his followers after him, as well as the being or beings known as Lamb, then what does that say about the many UFO and alien encounters, and indeed about UFOs and aliens in general? Are these entities not visiting us from different planets, but also from a different dimension? One only those adept in occultism know how to access. And might what we perceive as extraterrestrials from another world actually be entities from another dimension, one that runs alongside our own in ways that we are yet to fully understand? Taking these thoughts a stage further, where might the alien abduction phenomenon fit into all this? Might the creatures from another dimension who have only gained access to our world through ancient occult rituals suddenly begin systematically abducting members of the human population and then performing all manner of procedures and experiments on them? Might we consider that these interdimensional creatures require a physical body to exist in our world, much like many ancient writings state about such entity as the Watchers or other angels? And might the proposed hybridization theories put forward by some researchers not be one of a human-alien combination, but a human interdimensional being one? And could their presence on Earth go back decades, only now they have regained access to our world from the realm they were banished to thousands of years ago? As preposterous as it might seem to many, there is little reason to doubt the authenticity of Crowley's claims and accounts. Nor his sensationalism, the very fact he refused to speak widely for communication sessions in that New York hotel room should perhaps alert us to the fact that something very profound and possibly life-changing was relayed to the occultists during the opening months of 1918. Indeed, those rituals, and perhaps more specifically the attempts to replicate them by Crowley's followers, might very well prove to be life-changing for all of us. According to the legends of the ancient world, and even those
Midwest of the United States. National attention was focused on the property in 2012 amid claims of ghostly goings-on within its walls and even claims of demonic possession. The tenants of the property, a mother and her 2 children, were the focus of the bizarre events, with the mother claiming to have witnessed her 12-year-old daughter floating above her bed. Even more disturbing, this distraught mother was witness to her 9-year-old son hanging upside down from the ceiling, as if he were being held up by a pair of invisible hands. Ultimately, the family could no longer stand the onslaught of unsettling events that were taking place, and they left the property. Not long after, having followed their case closely, the host of the television series Ghost Adventures, Zach Bagans, purchased the property in order to live in it and conduct his own investigation. He would claim to have had several encounters with demonic forces in the house and asserted that a portal existed within the property that had to be closed. He would arrange for the house to be completely destroyed before having the rubble and debris collected and locked in a secure storage facility. Not too far away in the woodlands of Pulaski, Ohio, another gateway to hell is said to exist. Referred to as Satan's Hollow, local legends state that the gateway was opened by a group of Satanists who used a room in the tunnel of a storm drain for their rituals. Once more, this apparent entrance to the underworld is said to be guarded by a mysterious shadow man who will appear to anyone who attempts to enter the gateway. Those who have entered the tunnel system in their efforts to locate the entrance have claimed to have heard unnerving screams coming from deep inside, while others have simply felt such levels of negative energy that they've turned and left. Another intriguing location and apparent entrance to hell can be found in the otherwise sleepy town of Stowe in Kansas, where local legends state the devil himself will appear in the cemetery where the apparent gateway exists. Whilst most, even the locals, put these accounts down to urban legend, there are some strange events that have taken place in Stowe. Several buildings, for example, have suddenly caught fire, and what's more, no obvious cause has been established. Many paranormal investigators have even captured strange voices on tape in the cemetery. If you venture behind the Black Bridge Distillery in Clifton, New Jersey, and enter into the drain network, you'll soon find yourself surrounded by satanic symbols, words, and occult-like graffiti. You might also come across the rotting remains of corpses, said to be the victims of one ritual sacrifice or another. Adding an even darker feel to this already morose location is the fact that the tunnels circle around each other several times, said to be like the 7 circles of hell. Local legend states that there is a central room or chamber at the end of these tunnels that is sealed off by a pair of huge axes. Should a person be able to move, they will be granted entry into what is presumed to be the chamber of the devil himself. A short distance away in the appropriately titled Helen in Pennsylvania are the alleged 7 gates of hell, which reside in the woodlands just off Trout Run Road. According to legends local to the area, an insane asylum once stood on the land that was surrounded by 7 gates to keep patients inside the grounds. However, when a fire broke out at the facility, these gates only served to trap the patients and ensure a painful, fiery death. Legends further state that only one of these gates is ever visible in the daylight. However, should you pass it at night, you'll soon find yourself in front of another, and then another, until you pass through the 7th gate and ultimately into hell. Without a doubt, one of the most intriguing, if unsettling locations set to offer an entrance to the underworld is Puska Castle, which sits around 50 miles north of Prague in the Czech Republic. The castle, which is said to have been built directly over a bottomless pit that leads to hell, was constructed in the mid-13th century between 1253 and 1278. What's more, at least according to local legend, it was built for one reason, and one reason only, to keep the evil spirits of hell within the confines of its walls. This is perhaps backed up by the fact that all the windows on the castle are fake, and have simply been placed over the top of the surface, he had the appearance of an old man, and his hair had turned completely white. Just what might reside underneath this centuries-old castle is open to debate. Some people believe there is some kind of portal below the small chapel, while others speculate the pit leading up to hell, at least as we would understand it, but to the underworld that is possibly inhabited by an indigenous civilization that is unknown to us. There are also many locations from the ancient world that have long been considered gateways to hell. The Acheron River, for example, which is a real location in the northwest part of Greece, also features heavily in ancient Greek legend and mythology as an entrance to the underworld, and is mentioned in such epics as Virgil's The Aeneid, Dante's Inferno, and Homer's Odyssey. Another apparent entrance to hell, according to the ancient Greek legends, is the Cape Mountain Caves in the south of the country, which was said to be an entrance to the underworld that would allow those who enter there the chance to avoid the ferryman, Charon. What is further interesting about this location is the fact that a temple for the god Poseidon, the brother of Hades, the god of the underworld, can be found here. In the ancient city of Hierapolis, in what is modern day Abu Dhabi in Turkey, another intriguing ancient location with a potential gateway to the underworld can be found. In the writings of ancient Greek philosopher Strabo, they stated that the opening to the temple was of sufficient size to admit a man to a great depth. It would continue that once inside the entrance, the space is filled with a cloudy and dark vapor that was so dense it was impossible to see the floor. Even more concerning, any animals that entered the temple would die instantly. The ruins themselves match descriptions of what is called Pluto's Gate in ancient Greek mythology, which was a gateway to the underworld. What is further interesting about the descriptions of this location was a discovery made in 2013 by archaeologists of toxic gases that appear to be leaking from the doorway of the temple. Much like in the writing of Strabo, thousands of years earlier, they would notice how birds that flew particularly close to the temple doorway would simply drop to the ground dead. Perhaps the fact that these locations can be found in such legends should alert us to the fact that these legends might have more truth to them than many of us might think. Are these many entrances to hell real? But do they in fact lead to an underground network of caves and caverns that make up an inner earth, as opposed to the fiery lair of the devil? Might they be inhabited by an indigenous species that withdrew and went underground thousands, perhaps millions of years ago? Perhaps these same entities were responsible for creating these legends in the first place, so as to deter people from entering these out-of-the-way locations deep under the ground. If there is any truth to these claims, then just who might this subterranean civilization be, and why might they have gone underground in the first place?
Were the ancient Hebrews visited by time properly mentioned? Or were they mistaken? Was what they believed to be gods actually future spacemen? The idea of such ancient astronauts being well documented in hundreds of different writings in many ancient countries. Should we accept such evidence as realistic encounters? And if so, we have to ask the question, why are so many ancient writings pertaining to contact with gods being cited? Quite clearly, there is an overwhelming amount of evidence.
Were the ancient Hebrews visited by time-traveling men of the future, or were they mistaken? Was what they believed to be God actually future spacemen? There
highly respected NASA engineer. In his manuscript, Blumrich writes about spacecrafts and spacemen encountered in the Old Testament by the prophet Ezekiel. Although originally he had set out to disprove the hypothesis that Ezekiel had seen a spacecraft, after a thorough examination, he was convinced it was true. In the story, Ezekiel is shown the future by God, who was riding in a unique and elaborate vehicle. He was given the task to deliver various messages. God was accompanied by multiple angels. Ufologists began to point to the possibility of interpreting this experience as a witness of a spacecraft rather than God. Ezekiel first spaceship in 5000 BC whilst he was exiled in Babylon. It was by the Sheba River that he looked up and saw a great cloud of fire flashing forth from its midst. Four oblong structures were then seen descending from the vision's cloud. As the vehicle came closer, the prophet could see on each structure 4 helicopter blades, 2 landing legs with round footprints, and 4 mechanical hands. Ezekiel then writes that he saw lightning darting back and forth among the 4 creatures. The labs wasn't really saw the control modules being fired. Located on the inward side of each structure, they were used to position the craft for landing. After the vehicle had touched down, the prophet then spotted a large wheel on each of the structures. The 4 helicopter landing units were attached to the main stage of the spacecraft. Ezekiel depicts the hulls of firmament shining like crystal. This is a fairly accurate description of the mushroom-shaped metallic shell of the main body. On top of the main stage, the prophet sighted an astronaut that was wearing a gold-colored spacesuit. He spoke to Ezekiel as he sat on the pilot seat of the transparent top stage of the vehicle, the cloud capsule. After the alien had delivered a short pronouncement, he then took the prophet by spaceship back to his people. Later in his book, Ezekiel tells us that he was transported by the space vehicle to Jerusalem. He bore witness to the examinations of its ungodly citizens. At the command of his spaceship pilot, 6 astronauts used unknown weapons to slay the people, all except the ones with X marked on their foreheads. Ezekiel was also a bystander in another operation performed by the spaceman. First, the command capsule was separated from the main body immediately with the use of a metal detector to a safe location. Then the astronauts developed a life protective suit so they could stationary stealth by one of the helicopter structures. Next, one of the mechanical arms was found on the pulsar wiring fueling the inside of the main stage. This metal was transferred into the hands of the spaceman with protective suit. He took the mass, which was probably contaminated, and went out of the area, possibly buried. In the final step, the command capsule was returned to and recoupled to the top of the main configuration. In regards to the astronauts, in all biblical depictions, they were always portrayed as human beings. Accordingly, the space visitors must have been future Earthmen. The odds against alien beings having a close resemblance to Earth people would be astronomical. As for these spaceships, Blumrich believes that they were manufactured by another space technology not far ahead of ours. If we take into account the distances between the stars and the overwhelming technological difficulties of interstellar travel, it's entirely unlikely that those hypothetical mothership or biblical vehicles would have been capable of propelling itself to Earth from another star system in our universe. Therefore, the spaceships must have come from a nearby planet in another universe. We can rule out an alien extra-dimensional world, as there is only a slight chance that it would have parallel geological, biological, and technological development. This leaves one remaining possibility: the vehicles originated on an identical Earth existing at a time period in the immediate future. What is the evidence for this conclusion? We know that the biblical spacecrafts had 2 separately powered stages, like the American lunar modules, and that they were identified by the United States space engineer. Also, a crude model of the biblical craft has undergone successful testing at NASA's Lincoln Research Center, and Mr. Blumrich has secured a patent for the wheel system on the spaceship. These facts favor the theory that these space vehicles came from a future Earth, from our future. Surprisingly, this is not the only case in the Bible that can be interpreted as possible time travelers. Although Ezekiel is the most famous and well-known account, other writers, including John and Daniel, wrote accounts of angels that could be interpreted as time travelers. Some ufologists believe that Bible messages that were perceived as angels are actually human time travelers who have come to warn the world. Due to their limited understanding, the writers misinterpreted these experiences. Furthermore, cultural and religious bias at the time encouraged writers to fit their accounts into their own preconceived ideas of God and angels. Over time, through translations, many ideas on time travel was lost, and accounts simply became the word of God. If the angels really were time travelers from the future, what did they have to say? When researching these ancient accounts, it appears 4 different types of incidents were told. Stories of historical wars, astronomical events, the discovery of codes in the Bible, and even time travel encounters. Did these time travelers provide any other knowledge? In addition, there is the ancient Hebrew health code. Did time travelers gift Hebrew communities with their knowledge to help create healthier and more sanitary conditions? When thinking back to the past, specifically before the 19th century, it's expected that unsanitary conditions were commonplace. But curiously, this was not the case in the early Hebrew community. Medical officials were surprised to discover that the Israelites had reasonably modern health laws pertaining to body issues, leprosy, and circumcision, amongst other things. As modern medical science knows, many harmful bacteria can be transmitted by body discharges. In the past, knowing of this was lacking. Despite this, the Hebrews had many comprehensive regulations when dealing with this subject. For example, a person must have easement outside camp, and the excreta had to be buried. Individuals who came into contact with pathological discharges or other issues were considered unclean and were ordered to wash themselves and their clothes. Similar orders were also given with other conditions. When a person was found to have leprosy, they were expelled from the community. Once their quarantine ended, the infected person washed their body and garments, the scalp was shaved, and antiseptic was administered. Furthermore, all males were commanded to be circumcised on the 8th day of life. Why the 8th day? The probable reason for this condition is that vitamin K, a clotting element, is not manufactured in the proper amount until the 5th, 6th, or 7th day. Since circumcision causes bleeding, it would make good sense to wait until the 8th day. How would the Hebrews have known to do all of these things? How would they have known to disinfect or known to wait until the 8th day? Although it is possible that all these health laws were given to the Hebrews by alien spacemen, it's more probable that they came from future Earthmen. Time travelers would be fully acquainted with our complex life forms, as well as the languages spoken on this planet. With more advanced knowledge from their own time, they could aid the Hebrews with creating more sanitary conditions. This may explain why the Hebrews appear to have knowledge ahead of their time. Did these ancient spacemen exist at all? Were they mistaken as God? Or were they actually using a completely different origin? From fulfilling prophecies to advanced health laws, I just really believe that these ancient spacemen were actually prophets from the future. Throughout time, there have been many intriguing time travel stories. One of the most puzzling accounts deals with a very brilliant Egyptologist, Joseph Bonomi, and a mysterious inventor named Samuel Alfred Warner. Between them, it is rumored they designed and built a real time machine based on secret ancient Egyptian knowledge. Hiding deep within the grounds and shrouded by trees stands a full-building mausoleum, imposing 20 foot tall with a pyramid roof. It's made from granite, with a solid, heavy bronze door secured by a keyhole. Decorative massive sliding door further up the air of mystery. The door's margin displays a rectangular strip of Egyptian hieroglyphs. Built in the early 1850s, it was intended as the final resting place of a woman named Hannah Courtoy and 2 of her 3 daughters, Mary and Elizabeth. Very little is known about Hannah Courtoy. all about her three daughters, Elizabeth and Marianne. But for the last 150 years, they've been at eternal rest in a mausoleum at Brompton Cemetery, West London. During her lifetime, she'd amassed a fortune. Some said she'd been the mistress of kings, politicians, and rich, powerful men. No one knows who fathered her two daughters, but they died soon after their mother, and nobody knows how they died. More mysterious still is the mausoleum, standing 20 feet tall in the middle of Brompton Cemetery, and rumoured to be a time machine. It is rumoured that Bonamy designed Hannah's mausoleum, a theory given some credence by its pyramid-shaped peak, and by the mysterious hieroglyphics inscribed on the walls of the tomb and on Bonamy's own headstone. The Victorians were fascinated with the idea of time travel, and some believed the pharaohs had discovered its secrets. Might Bonamy have learned the time travel trick during one of his expeditions to the pyramids? Gently opening the old iron gate of Brompton Cemetery is somewhat similar to breaking the spine of a book containing some secret London history. Well-known suffragist Emily Pankhurst was laid to rest here. Beatrix Potter also walked many plots of land and penned names from gravestones to use in her work, these including decedents Peter Rabbit and Mr. Lumpkins. In excess of 35,000 landmarks in all are available, rich and poor, known and forgotten. Hannah Courtois' tomb would be impressive for its imposing statue, particularly alone. It's the largest, most elaborate construction in all of Brompton Cemetery, but there's more to this story, much more, that it's secretly a time machine. London musician and Courtois historian Stephen Coates, the man behind some of the recent bizarre claims, states it's not a time machine, it's a teleportation chamber. In order to try and interpret the bizarre urban legend that's been constructed around Courtois' tomb, it helps to understand the complex and secretive life of the woman who ordered its construction. Born around 1784, Hannah Peters fled an abusive father at a young age and found work as a housekeeper and as a tavern employee. In 1800, a friend introduced her to John Courtois, a 70-year-old former wigmaker in poor health who had made a fortune in the early banking business. Peters was shortly in his employ as a housekeeper. Within the year, she had given birth to the first of three daughters. She claimed they were indeed Courtois despite his age, although some suspected and made it known they believed that the friend who made the introduction, Francis Grosso, might have been the real father. John Courtois' illness is also ill-defined in historical accounts, although it was rumoured he had a violent run-in with a street worker in 1795 that left Courtois, who had been attacked with a knife, reserved and antisocial. He fell in love with the young Hannah, who took his name and had considerable influence over many of his decisions. Courtois' 1810 will, which initially left most of his fortune to an ex-wife named Marianne Woolley and their 5 children, was changed in 1814, so Hannah received the majority of his wealth. Like many Victorians at the time, Hannah was intrigued by Egyptian iconography, particularly hieroglyphics. She believed the Egyptians had a deep understanding of astrology and of their place in the universe, and she invited Egyptologist Joseph Bonamy over to her home for regular visits. Bonamy and Hannah would spend hours discussing Egyptian law, with Hannah hoping to one day fund Bonamy's expeditions to Egypt so he could further their studies. When Hannah passed away in 1849, she was laid to rest in an expensive, elaborately designed mausoleum in Brompton that paid tribute to her interests. Bonamy arranged for the tomb to feature Egyptian characters and a pyramidal top. Later, Mary Elizabeth, who never married for fear of losing her wealth to untrustworthy men, joined her. Susanna, her third daughter who married, was buried elsewhere. When Bonamy died in 1878, he arranged for a depiction of Courtois' tomb to appear on his own modest headstone. Whether Bonamy intended it or not, an illustration of Anubis, the Egyptian god of the dead, appears to be looking in the direction of his friend's final resting place.
things appeared to be normal at Brompton for the next 100 years or so. Then, around 1980, the key to the tomb was lost following a visit by Hannah's relatives, and that's when things took a turn for the weird. It was reporter Helen Smith who unsuspectingly wrote an article in 1998. That article may have been the first mainstream story to raise the theory that Portwood's tomb might actually be a time machine. She described the monument as a strange, imposing structure containing 3 spinsters, about whom almost nothing is known, and cited an unheralded author named Howard Webster as perpetrator of the story. Webster claimed his research had excavated a connection between Bonamy and Samuel Alfred Warner, a maverick Victorian genius who falsely said he had attempted to interest the British Armed Forces in several advanced weapons, too advanced, in fact, to actually exist. Webster thought that Warner's inventive genius may have led him to team up with Bonamy, who supposedly had knowledge of the Egyptian theories of time travel. Together, the two persuaded the wealthy, trusting Hannah to finance their secret project, with Bonamy providing ancient wisdom and Warner adding his breakthrough scientific resources. By strategically placing their device in a cemetery, Warner could guarantee the structure was unlikely to be disturbed over decades or centuries, allowing him to return to London after travelling through time again and again. The fact that the key was missing was pivotal to Webster's tale. Since it had been lost and no one had opened the mausoleum for years, could it be perhaps that Warner was busying himself in a manner similar to an occupant of the TARDIS, travelling from era to era, while Hannah and her family were either entombed or buried someplace else entirely? Webster also claimed that the blueprints for the tomb were missing, which was very unusual for monuments in Brompton. The story slowly gathered momentum over the years. In 2003, an album cover by musician Drew Holland illustrated Hannah's tomb and its mysterious construction. This too helped pique the public's interest. In 2011, Coates, a musician with a band named The Real Tuesday Weld, read about Hannah's alleged time machine and became intrigued. He wrote an article on his blog postulating that the Portwood tomb was not a means of time travel, but that Warner had the technology to teleport torpedoes, and that he later adopted the framework to develop a series of teleportation chambers in and around the Magnificent Seven, a group of London's historic private cemeteries. It was a way to move around the city, Coates says. Warner and Bonamy worked together on an ancient Egyptian occult theory and science. I posted that on my blog, and it started to take on a life of its own, he said. Coates' premise is a proper study in how an urban legend can proliferate. With the key still missing, it was impossible to disprove the teleportation idea with any real precision. The mythology allowed for a great deal of speculation. Why did the tomb take 4 years to complete following Hannah's death, which meant she didn't actually enter it until 1853? Was Hannah fooled by the tomb to fund what she believed would be a time machine? It can be difficult to corner Coates for a precise answer on whether he believes his fanciful hypothesis about the resting place of Hannah Portwood. When initially contacted by the Floss Online magazine for an interview, he agreed while mentioning that he came up with the whole teleportation system idea as the background to a short story. In conversation, he presents the teleportation springboard as a way for people to make up their own mind about what the tomb might contain. A breath or two later, he expresses doubts that Hannah's daughters might still be entombed there, before wondering whether the mausoleum might be home to a secret subterranean chamber. It's all alternative theory based on historical facts, he says.
Very loud.
It may not establish it's not a time machine, Coates edges. It may just deepen the mystery. For many, the tomb is a slab of rock. The real magic is in their minds.
Yeah, we laugh.
In recent years, special access programs developed under the United States government have documented their current research topics, one of which has received significant funding. Studying wormholes is a very real thing, and certainly back to with celebrities. NASA have also revealed the study into bottles, which they have stated are largely sustained. Could it be that such authorities have finally stumbled onto these invisible doorways to other locations? And if so, how long have such things been around? Could such a new discovery account for some of the strangest incidents on planet Earth? Many psychic researchers who are investigating this enigma are convinced that this planet Earth holds many secrets which are constantly being grown. Indeed, these invisible windows through which individuals have taken a journey to the past is only one of many histories of planet Earth.
The airship sightings of 1897 are arguably the first UFO wave in history, 50 years before the start of the modern UFO era. The wave itself actually began in November 1896, when mysterious airships were spotted flying against the wind over San Francisco. From there, they appeared to head steadily east, being spotted across California and into the states of the Midwest. By April of 1897, sightings were being made over Chicago, Illinois, and continued to be reported south of the Windy City over the coming days and weeks. However, when these strange vessels reached Texas, some of the most intriguing episodes of all unfolded. Just who might the crew of these bizarre aerial vehicles have been? Without a doubt, one of the most intriguing and detailed encounters on record during the wave of airship sightings was that of John Barclay in Texas. According to the account, which appeared in the Houston Post newspaper on the evening of April 21st, 1897, John Barclay awoke to hear his dogs barking agitatedly outside. At the same time, he could hear a high-pitched whirring sound, seemingly coming from above his house. He was more than shocked to see just one of those airships descending into a field a short distance from his house. He later described the airship as being a curious, oblong shape with wings and various unknown side attachments. He also recalled that there were several bright lights on board the vessel, lights that were much brighter than electric lights. He set out towards the craft, noting that the lights went out the closer he got to it. There was still enough light from the moon, however, for him to be able to see the vehicle clearly. Before he could reach it, though, as if out of nowhere, a man was suddenly standing in front of him. He assured him he would come to no harm and asked Barclay to lower his gun, which he duly did. After a moment or two, Barclay asked the stranger his name, to which he replied that it didn't matter about his name and that he could call him Smith. The man then proceeded to hand Barclay a crisp $10 note before asking if he could purchase lubricating oil, 2 chisels, and some bluestone from him. He offered that Barclay could keep the change for his assistance. Barclay agreed, but before going on his way, he asked the mysterious gentleman if he might be able to see the ship. To this the man declined, stating that he couldn't permit him to get any closer to it, although he didn't offer why. He did say, though, that they would return some future day and take him for a ride then. With that, Barclay went on his way to purchase the items he had been asked to obtain. He would return a short time later. He had managed to get chisels and oil, but was unable to find any bluestone. He offered the man the $10 back, but he was told he should keep it for his trouble, and the man thanked him for his efforts. With that, the man turned to head back to the waiting vehicle. Barclay called out to him, asking where he was from. He replied he was from anywhere, but that they would be in Greece the day after tomorrow. And with that, the object had disappeared, as if it had vanished into thin air, like it had been shot out of a gun. Given the hints had been from another time, I'd been contemplating whether this mystery man meant Greece in April 1897, or Greece thousands of years in the past, during its ancient civilization. By all accounts of those the reporter from the Houston Post spoke with, John Barclay was as an incredible witness as you could hope for, and certainly not someone to make up such an encounter. The Houston Post carried another very similar account several days later, this time a short distance away in Jocelyn. Frank Nichols was dragged out of his sleep the following evening on April the 22nd by a strange machine-type noise coming from outside his house. He could see an airship-type vehicle landing in one of his fields. He quickly
made his way outside and towards the craft before two men appeared in front of him. Each of them was carrying a large bucket and asked if there was a well where they could obtain water. Nichols, also regarded as an honourable and credible witness, led them to one of his wells nearby.
Well, they came
After
back.
they had filled the buckets with water, the two men invited Nichols to look at their vessel. He would later record to the Houston Post that while they gave him a detailed explanation of how it worked, it was much too complicated and he couldn't understand most of what they were telling him. He did recall, though, that the vehicle ran on highly condensed electricity, and perhaps intriguingly, that this technology would soon be given to the wider public. These two strangers further informed Nichols that 5 of these vehicles had been built in the state of Iowa and were being tested as they used a newly discovered material.
That's what I've
The
seen
similar
in the
account
sky.
unfolded several weeks later in Hot Springs,
Wow, babe.
Arkansas, on the rainy evening of May the 6th. On the night in question, Deputy Sheriff McLemore and Constable Sumter witnessed an approaching airship land near where they stood. They immediately made their way to where the object had descended to investigate further. When they were a short distance away, they called out to those on board, asking them to identify themselves. After the light of the vessel, a bearded man approached them. He was carrying a smaller light and replied to the officers that he and his passengers, another man and a woman, were travelling across the country in an airship. While the woman largely kept herself back in the shadows, the other man appeared to be filling something that appeared to be a sack with water. After several moments, the bearded man offered the 2 police officers a ride on the vehicle, claiming that they could take them where it wasn't raining. 2 officers, however, politely declined. Interestingly, McLemore
On
would
that
recall
trip,
how the
very
red light on the ship appeared to dim and brighten repeatedly. When we consider the fact that the Hot Springs area is a site of natural crystal, we might contemplate whether some kind of recharge operation was taking place between these crystal formations of the area and some kind of advanced
I need to be
technology.
around in Venice.
So who were these
They be
mysterious
doing this shit.
visitors who were seemingly traversing the United States on these mystery airships? While the sightings automatically fall into the UFO field of research, as Jacques Vallée commented in his book Dimensions, it is highly unlikely that the occupants of the airships were extraterrestrial in nature, not least as they looked exactly like any other American at the time and appeared familiar with and possessed American currency. Might these mysterious aerial travellers have been everyday American citizens who just happened to be part of some kind of top-secret testing of a new flying vehicle? As tantalising as the idea seems, it appears unlikely. Where, for example, was the great unveiling of such new aerial vehicles in the years that followed? If not aliens or engineers testing out an experimental machine, then might we consider that those on board these airships had arrived in America not from another country, but from another time? We might recall how the travellers John Barclay met claimed they could come from anywhere and would be in Greece the day after tomorrow. We perhaps should also consider the possibility that these travellers had not come from the future, but quite possibly from the past. After all, we accept even the possibility that advanced civilizations existed in the distant past, who is to say that they might not have been developed and advanced enough to have been able to master time travel. Perhaps the occupants of the airships had arrived into then the future from long before our own history. Like many such mysterious and curious encounters, there are many more questions than answers regarding the airship sightings of 1897, including exactly where these strange ships and their occupants arrived from. Unpublished 17th century AD alchemical documents reveal Sir Isaac Newton's private Egyptian pyramid studies in his quest to calculate a date for the end of days. In July 1936 AD, a metal chest surfaced at Sotheby's auction house in London, filled with Isaac Newton's unpublished, private, handwritten papers and lab books. After economist John Maynard Keynes bought the treasure chest, he was shocked to find Newton was not only a force in mathematical theory, astronomy and optics, but that he was also a clandestine esoteric theologist and an alchemist, questing otherworldly realms beyond physics with the assistance of supernatural forces. According to Sam Keynes, Newton, the last magician, the great man of science, was secretly Europe's leading alchemist, and believed his deepest universal insights came from his communications with ancient spirits. Having spent decades exploring the macro and micro mechanics of the universe, seeking a date for Armageddon, Newton is believed to have decoded it from the measurements and proportions of the legendary Solomon's Temple. Now, more unpublished papers reveal a key step in Newton's search for the date of Armageddon, the quest to find a hidden mathematical code within the dimensions of the Great Pyramid of Egypt. Isaac Newton's new papers worth a small fortune. Isaac Newton has always been the #1 primary icon for rational thinking, logic, and reason. So when his alchemical interests were first revealed, it was a great embarrassment to the scientific community, and it's happening again. The works revealing more of Newton's attempts to ascertain a date for the apocalypse are now being sold by Sotheby's and show his genius interpretations of the geometry, scale, and proportions of the Great Pyramid of Egypt. According to a report in The Guardian, Gabriel Heaton, Sotheby's manuscript specialist, says the papers take you remarkably quickly straight to the heart of a number of the deepest questions Newton was investigating. He added that the 3 papers are expected to fetch hundreds of thousands of pounds at auction next Tuesday. The Sotheby's antique specialist said Newton was trying to uncover the unit of measurement used by those constructing the pyramids, as he suspected it would disclose a microcosmic expression of the measure of the earth. Isaac Newton, master of the universe. Newton studied the pyramids in the 1680s, but his real goal was to calculate the prime measurements of the biblical Temple of Solomon, in which he was convinced the date for the apocalypse was embedded. Heaton says the alchemist was looking for proof for his theory of gravitation, and he believed the secrets of ancient Egyptian alchemy would provide the required evidence. Building on Heaton's suggestion, a 4-part series of research articles was published in 2016. In the first installment, Isaac Newton and the Temple of Doom, it was presented Newton's study of the Temple of Solomon, the Philosopher's Stone, and the Emerald Tablet. Newton believed the Emerald Tablet had alchemical Egyptian origins, and as he matured, it satisfied his theological thirst. The 10 magical lines of the tablet became a foundation for Newton's cosmological outlook and his developments of universal models. We would go so far as to suggest the Emerald Tablet actually inspired the alchemists' most famous universal laws. For example, line 10 of the Emerald Tablet says, "Its force is above all force, for it vanquishes every subtle thing and penetrates every solid thing." Pop culture tells us that Newton conceived the concept of gravity after an apple fell on his head. But read this 10th line again, and you'll see how succinctly and clearly the sentence describes gravity, which is defined by modern science as the force that attracts a body towards the center of the earth or towards any other physical body having mass. Isaac Newton and the End of Time. In a letter dated 1704, which is currently on display at the Hebrew University in Jerusalem, Newton explained that after 30 years of analyzing the measurements, ratios, proportions, and architectural features in ancient buildings, he had unearthed a secret number system within the biblical books of Daniel and the Revelations. And from his secret code, he declared the prophetic year 2060 AD as the date of Armageddon, the end of days. But just how many of his paradigm-shifting scientific achievements resulted from his quest for the Philosopher's Stone and his translation of the Emerald Tablet of Hermes? Newton's secret treasure, acquired by John Maynard Keynes. While Isaac Newton a towering sentinel of the scientific method on a global platform, he was secretly a deeply mystical, magical, and animistic thinker. The Newton Project website provides scans of papers written by John Maynard Keynes, offering researchers insights into Newton's inner thoughts. For example, the universe was a cryptogram sent by the Almighty. Newton set out to read the riddle of the Godhead, of past and future events divinely foreordained. And according to Keynes, Newton turned to the early philosophical works of the 16th century European intellectuals who formed the mystical secret society, the ancient mystical order Rosicrucis, better known as the Rosicrucians. Deeply religious and anti-Catholic, just like Newton, the Rosicrucians strive to create a liquid called the elixir vitae and a substance called the philosopher's stone, required to produce limitless amounts of gold. Michael White's 1999 book, Isaac Newton, The Last Sorcerer, tells us Newton owned 169 books on alchemy, including a highly annotated English translation of Thomas Vaughan's Rosicrucian Manifestos, The Fame and Confession of the Fraternity R.C., and the Themis Aurea by Michael Mayer, a classic early work on the origins of Gnosticism and the Rosicrucian movement. A quote by Keynes published in Sir Isaac Newton, The Last Sorcerer, perfectly summarizes the importance Newton assigned to alchemy in his quest for unusual truths. Newton was motivated by a deep-rooted commitment to the notion that the alchemical wisdom extended back to ancient times.
The 2nd century map of Germania by the ancient Egyptian Greek scholar Ptolemy has always baffled scholars who have been for centuries unable to relate many of the places depicted to known settlements. But recently, a team of researchers based in Berlin has managed to crack the code, revealing that half of Germany's cities are at least 1,000 years older than previously believed. Ptolemy was an Egyptian scholar of Greek descent who flourished in the city of Alexandria during the 2nd century AD. He was an astronomer, mathematician and geographer, and a large part of medieval astronomy and geography were built on his ideas. His astonishing world map, published as part of his treatise Geography in the 2nd century, was the first to use longitudinal and latitudinal lines. Ptolemy based his maps mainly on the maps and writings of Marinus of Tyre, 100 AD, of whom, however, he was highly critical. Ptolemy did use other sources which have not been traced, and also added more current information available to him at the time, mainly concerning the Asian and African coasts of the Indian Ocean. He would also make use of astronomical and geographical specialist literature available in the Great Library of Alexandria. Ptolemy is also well known today for his geocentric, Earth-centered model of the universe, now known as the Ptolemaic system. In Ptolemy's great 13-volume work, The Syntaxis, also known as the Almagest, Ptolemy made some startling observations. When compared with modern astronomical tables, some of them are so accurate that Isaac Newton claimed he couldn't have made them with the instruments he said he used. Frustratingly, some of Ptolemy's other observations are full of errors. Ptolemy also wrote a treatise on astrology called Astrological Influences, in which he stated his belief that astrology was a legitimate science which describes the physical effects of the heavens on life on Earth. Ptolemy's geography was written around AD 150 in 8 volumes and contained 26 maps in coloured ink on dried animal skin. It was essentially what today would be called an atlas, though unfortunately his maps have subsequently disappeared and nothing remains of the work but his index. His work was painstakingly copied by hand at the time and redistributed, but many of his maps were not redrawn when copies were made. The majority of copies known to exist today do not include Ptolemy's original drawings. Instead, the books include maps made hundreds of years later, based on his descriptions. However, over the years, various scholars have been able to redraw Ptolemy's maps accurately from the longitudes and latitudes in degrees for roughly 8,000 locations on his world map. So in essence, what we have in Ptolemy's map is a clear and thorough picture of the world as it was known by an inhabitant of the Roman Empire at its height. This vast world extended from the Shetland Islands north of Scotland to the sources of the Nile in Uganda in the south, from the Canary Islands in the west China and Southeast Asia in the east. Ptolemy believed the world as it was known then covered about a quarter of the Earth's surface, and in this he was fairly accurate. Like numerous ancient books and scholarly works, especially those housed at the now disappeared library at Alexandria, Ptolemy's geography was lost for over a millennium to Western scholarship. But towards the end of the 1400s, during the Renaissance period, his work was rediscovered and translated into Latin, the language of Western scholars at the time. The work became popular once again, and over 40 editions were printed. In fact, it wouldn't be going too far to say that the new edition caused a sensation, challenging the very foundation of medieval map-making, which had been that map-makers up until then had based the sizes of countries and cities on their importance rather than on mathematical calculations. Therefore, the more important a country was perceived as being, the larger it would appear on the map. Ptolemy's geography is an astonishing achievement when one considers that for over 15 centuries it was the most detailed topography in Europe and Asia available, and the best reference on how to collect data and draw maps. The most authentic copy of Ptolemy's map still in existence is an edition produced around the year 1300 and kept by the Vatican. Ptolemy's incredible atlas was in the news again recently when a new study of it was made by a team of classical philologists, mathematical historians, and surveying experts at Berlin Technical University's Department for Geodesy and Geoinformation. The early histories of the majority of German towns east of the Rhine, an area that the Romans were never able to occupy permanently, are largely unknown, and the places themselves are not stated in documents until the Middle Ages. Logically, this should mean that the cities date back no more than 500 years or so. However, the researchers from Berlin Technical University Science have been able to challenge this assumption by producing an incredible map of Central Europe as it was 2,000 years ago, based on Ptolemy's geography. One of Ptolemy's maps was Germania Magna, a territory that must have been completely unknown to someone living in the distant Egyptian city of Alexandria on an estuary of the Nile. According to Ptolemy, this area is bordered by the Rhine in the west, the North Sea and the Baltic Sea in the north, the Danube in the south, and the Vistula and the western Carpathian Mountains in the east. Curiously, Ptolemy lists 94 settlements in Germania, while the far more accessible 3 provinces of Gallia had only 114 settlements in total. Ptolemy also does not attribute any of these Germanic settlements to a tribal group, though he notes their latitude and longitude accurately to within a few minutes. If this was unknown non-Roman territory, where was Ptolemy getting his information? There's also the major problem that if the Ptolemaic coordinates of a place are compared to its coordinates in a modern geographic reference system, they're usually completely different. There are a number of reasons for this, but among them is the different zero meridians of the Ptolemaic and modern reference systems. There are also various errors in the Ptolemaic coordinates. Furthermore, the majority of the place names in Germania Magna occur nowhere else, and are only handed down by Ptolemy, not by any other ancient writer. So although Ptolemy's map provides us with the most comprehensive topographical description of ancient Germania, because of these aforementioned problems it hasn't been possible up to now to reliably locate even a few of the places he mentions. It's known that Ptolemy never took his own measurements in northern and western Europe, and certainly not in the Germanic lands. Researchers believe he may well have drawn on long-lost Roman traders' travel itineraries and sailors' notes, or even consulted maps used by Roman legions operating in northern Europe in the form of war reports and maps. But the answer to the puzzle of Germania's ancient settlements has never been found. Until now, that is. For the first time, a team of experts combining skills in the field of surveying and mapping came together to try and solve one of Ptolemy's map's many mysteries. The Berlin-based team examined the data on Ptolemy's map of Germania Magna for 6 long years, developing a so-called geodetic deformation analysis that would hopefully correct the map's mistakes. One of the results of their work is the pinpointing of the hometowns of the legendary Germanic figures Siegfried and Arminius to within 6 to 12 miles. The team even produced a book, Germania and the Island of Tula, about their fascinating project. Although the copy of Ptolemy's geography held by the Vatican is thought to be the oldest, the Berlin team was somehow able to get hold of copies of the parchment which had been tracked down to Topkapi Palace in Istanbul, Turkey, once the residence of the Ottoman sultans. The priceless document consisted of unbound sheepskin pages with writing in Roman capital letters. This is now believed to be the oldest edition of Ptolemy's work ever discovered. Using the newly discovered map, the team discovered that even minor German towns such as Salzgotten or Landorf had existed for at least 2,000 years. They found that Treber, located at the confluence of the Elbe and Alster rivers, was the precursor to Hamburg, and that Leipzig was known as Arigalia. In essence, these discoveries show that half the cities in Germany are now 1,000 years older than previously believed. Another fascinating aspect of the research has been the fact that a large amount of Ptolemy's coordinates for ancient German settlements often turn out to coincide with sites where archaeologists have previously found Gothic or Teutonic houses and large elaborate tombs erected for tribal princes. What more secrets awaiting discovery lie in the coordinates of Ptolemy's maps?
How to go again. Toys are back in the box and on the big screen.
It's been too long, cowboy.
Find all 3 Toy Story 5 spoons inside specially marked Kellogg cereal boxes. And see Disney and Pixar's Toy Story 5, only in theaters.
High John the Conqueror is the most iconic figure in Black American folklore, and today on the Voodoo and Chill podcast, we are discussing everything High John the Conqueror, from his relationship to the John and Master folklore stories, his relationship as a spiritual guide to enslaved Black Americans, as well as why he is a spirit that is specifically for Black Americans, as well as how he is used in the Voodoo tradition. Good morning and grand rising, or grand evening, wherever you may be listening. It is me, Papa Seer, host, narrator, and storyteller of the #1 Voodoo and spirituality-based podcast, the Voodoo and Chill podcast. And as always, I am so excited to be here. I encourage everyone to like, share, and subscribe, so the next time we upload an episode, get the notification directly to your email and directly to your device. So I want to start off today by talking about High John the Conqueror is an African spirit for Black Americans. For anyone who has never heard the origin story of High John the Conqueror, I would highly suggest picking up Zora Hurston, released, I believe, in 1943. She published High John the Conqueror, not spelled Conqueror, just High John the Conqueror. So High John DECONKOR, High John the Conqueror. She, I believe, published this in 1943. It's a short introduction to the spirit of High John the Conqueror, and honestly, my favorites. Not just because I love Zora Neale Hurston, I just love the way she put the story together after collecting information from so many different people. It was put together beautifully. High John the Conqueror was said to have come from Africa, traveling on traveling on the winds of sound. I want you all to understand that sound and laughter is very, very important in this story. The whole purpose of John coming to the Americas from Africa was to specifically help the Black Americans who were suffering during the times of transatlantic slavery. It is also said in the legend that John the Conqueror rode the same winds that carried the ships from Africa into the Americas. In Black American folklore, Africa is seen as a land that represents wisdom, old knowledge, power, but most importantly, freedom. Any character that we find that is looked to as a liberator often has some form of heritage or significance or origin story from Africa. High John the Conqueror in Black American folklore is seen as a liberator, a bringer of justice, and as Zora Neale Hurston describes him, as the hope bringer. So it would only make sense that his origin story starts in Africa, which also speaks to the whispers of old tales that were passed down from Africa. In this moment, I want to move away from John the Conqueror and I want to bring up Plantation John. We will go back to John the Conqueror and I will tell the full tale. It is important to bring up Plantation John, especially in today's age, because we often mix the two, we confuse the two, or we incorrectly refer to them interchangeably. What I'm saying is that many of the stories that we know today, what we assume to be John the Conqueror, sometimes are stories of Plantation John. And while they too share the same origin of archetype, they are not the same. There's a big significant difference between the two of them, which I want to touch on today, as well as tell the story of High John the Conqueror. Plantation John is different from the spirit High John the Conqueror. Plantation John is not a spirit. Plantation John is a character who represents a real person and embodies sort of a Black American version of a jester, trickster, spirit, persona, all wrapped up into one, but this is an actual real person. And what I think is important here to recognize is the intention of these two Johns. The first intention of John the Conqueror, this is a mythical spirit of the supernatural who is associated with justice and hope and deliverance. Plantation John is not a spirit. Plantation John represents a real person. The intention of Plantation John is to bring about humor, to make light of a horrible situation, which is also another form of resilience. Again, I always talk about the resilience of Black people. I just think that we can find power out of anything. Both very, very powerful, but they serve their own purpose. Plantation John was there to make humor out of the horrors of their everyday life. Something to smile about, something to crack a joke about, something to put a smile on your face. And I love the John and Master stories. I mean, sometimes, yes, it can definitely be triggering some of the words that are used in the stories, but they're really funny. How I could see someone maybe sharing these stories with the children or going about a day's work just to make a chuckle or a smile to get the day's work, to just offer some type of resilience in the form of laughter to people during that time. The stories of Plantation John are reflections of the lived experiences of our ancestors. They portray the dynamics between our ancestors who were forced to be enslaved and their owners. In these stories, Plantation John, is always the protagonist. All of these stories revolve around conflict, which is often told in a very, very humorous way. Now, of course, many people have connected the stories of Plantation John and Master to John taking on attributes from African trickster figures like Anansi, the spider, or the Yoruba deity Eshu, which I do believe that very much those attributes do exist, but I think they are attributes of many different deities that come from the land of Africa. So again, these are very good stories, very entertaining, and they serve their purpose as a form of resilience through humor. But John, Plantation John, again, is not the same as High John the Conqueror, nor does he serve the same intention. Some people argue that Plantation John and John the Conqueror are not connected in any way, that they hail from distinct traditions because their intentions are so different. I like to think differently. I do believe that these two are connected intricately in a way. Plantation John is a branch, or even I dare to say a watered down version of High John the Conqueror. Let us shift our focus back to the story of High John the Conqueror. High John started off as a whisper. Hey everyone, welcome back to Papa Sears YouTube channel. If you love diving into captivating stories about hoodoo history, Black American spirituality, and so much more, then you're in the right place. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel so you always know whenever I post a new video. I'll give you a moment right now to go ahead and hit like and also subscribe. Making videos for these amazing stories takes a lot of work and a lot of time. So if you'd love to support my work, please consider donating by using the Super Thanks button or one of the donation links in the video description. Your support helps grow the channel and also gives me the time and flexibility to continue bringing these fascinating stories. Now, let's get back to the video. He was a spirit that took on the flesh of a man. He was a spirit that was said to have traveled the ways of sound in the same winds that carried the Africans to the Americas. High John the Conqueror traveled on those same winds to come to the land of America. The spirit of High John the Conqueror was said to have brought music and laughter on the plantation. We have to remember that his chosen form was a man who worked on a plantation. High John the Conqueror also had the ability of fast travel. He worked on all the plantations according to how the story goes. It wasn't just one particular one. He basically worked on all of them. He was always there. As long as slavery existed, he was always there on the plantations, helping the people there. It was said that his presence was like a drum beat. It was a sound that wasn't something you danced to, but it was like they said it was like a drum beat of life. It was a drum beat that kept the people going. It was a drum beat that gave them strength and endurance as they worked tirelessly. High John was said to have an infectious laugh. He loved to sing. He loved dancing. He loved when the people on the plantation would sing and come together. There are stories about him garnishing them instruments as well. It was said that when High John came to these lands, he showed the people here that in the future, slavery was going to end and that one day their ancestors were going to be free, that people were going to be liberated. This vision that he gave them, it was one of the powers that inspired hope in into the people for their everyday life. I do want to take a moment here to profile this spirit because we have to remember that every spirit has their own limitations, their own characteristics, and their own makeup. And High John, while his name is High John the Conqueror, he was a trickster spirit. He was not a spirit of war. He was a spirit of intellect. And I don't think that people give him enough credit for the intellect that he had that coincides with those stories, how he was able to talk his way out of situations, how he was able to quickly navigate through problems, how he was very, very quick-witted. Okay, he was not someone that was stupid. Oftentimes, he played stupid to outsmart the master. Okay, so he wasn't this spirit of war and fire and rebellion. He was very much a spirit of intellect, and he seemed to be to act more sort of like a spirit guide who was there to assist the people on the plantations with their everyday needs, everyday necessities, be of aid in some way to make their lives just a little bit easier in any possible way that he can. A spirit of wit and intellect on how to outsmart things. In the early times of slavery, he was also a spirit that was taken very, very serious because he was seen as someone who would eventually liberate them from enslavement and oppression as well. Many stories that you hear about Brother Rabbit, those are actually stories about High John the Conqueror. The power of High John the Conqueror was shrouded in his secrecy. This was a spirit, this was a figure that wasn't talked about with, to, or amongst white people during those times. It was supposed to be a spirit specifically solely and only for Black Americans during that time, which I will touch more on later on in this podcast. But back to the story, it was said that white people were not able to understand High John the Conqueror. They wouldn't even have known if he was in their presence. He specifically was not for them. He was for people who were in a very, very hard situation, and he specifically came from Africa to America to help enslave Black Americans. So it was said in his legends that
you've never been here before, or here, but somehow all your travel made it feel like it was waiting, like it was hot luck, serendipity, because the best journeys don't feel booked, they feel discovered. That's not coincidence. That's all you travel.
Performance, durability, affordability. Only one place does it all. Harbor Freight. Car takes a corner? All he does pay for car rent. Your statements restricted. There's a rhythm that picks up when life slows down.
he was not for white people, nor could they understand him or make awareness when he was in their presence. There was no definitive image, photo, or portrayal of High John the Conqueror. Again, he was a spirit who took the form of a man on a plantation, so his look could have varied. Many depictions of High John the Conqueror are always reminiscent of like a John Henry kind of figure, this tall, strong, muscular Black man who looks like he's a conqueror. So the depictions of him vary. But I do think, it's something to think about to kind of only box him in this category of being depicted as, this tall, muscular man. I get it, the name the conqueror, but again, this spirit was more so about conquering things with your mind, how to outsmart, how to outwit things. So it does make sense to depict him maybe as someone shorter, not muscular, to depict how he had to use brain over brawn. just something to think about again. You know, I'm not stuck on his depiction. I think that may vary, or potentially, as many tricks the spirits are, they have the power to shapeshift. High John the Conqueror could materialize himself in many different forms in our lives. And again, this is still a spirit that we are talking about. His name meant power. High John the Conqueror, it was a feeling, it was a name that represented power, being able to overcome the impossible. When freedom was given to the enslaved populace in the Americas, the stories and the belief in High John dwindled significantly. This didn't upset High John at all. Again, this is a part of the story. He came here for a purpose, which was help, assist with daily life on plantations, and to get the people here free, the Black Americans. He knew that once he accomplished his goal, that his popularity or his notoriety would dwindle with that. So he wasn't upset about it. What he did was he implanted his home, his power, his essence into the High John root. That would forever be his dwelling here in the Americas. And that anyone who held that root and dressed it with perfume and kept it on them or kept it in a secret place, that was a way to summon his spirit. That the spirit of High John will never forsake the weak and the helpless, nor will it fail to bring hope to the helpless. So here we have two figures. We have Plantation John and we have High John the Conqueror. And to be blunt, I truly believe that the story of High John the Conqueror, the importance of this figure, has truly been watered down in one of the biggest ways. When this was a form of spiritual resistance utilized as a way and also a coping mechanism to deal with the horrors of everyday life of our ancestors. I'll get more into that too in a second, right? But let's back up for a second. Here we have, and I believe that the story, the legend of High John, not the legend, but the folklore surrounding the spirit of High John the Conqueror, this existed first before Plantation John. This is what I believe, this is what my spirit is telling me, that this was first. Our ancestors formed a belief around this spirit that would liberate them. But let's not just look at the main picture here, liberation from slavery, because I think that can take away from even a greater aspect here too, that this was a spirit that was active in daily life on the plantation. No one talks about that. The good luck spirit that is alive daily on the plantation. And when I say that this spirit has been etched into an early belief system among enslaved Black Americans, you have to think about what this belief could potentially inspire internally for a human being. You think about things like rebellion. We walk with the spirit of John the Conqueror, so now we're going to rebel, or even running away with the spirit or the charm of John the Conqueror, who's going to make sure that you're able to escape with success. When I say these things, it's actually very profound. When you think about all of the little details of inspiration that lie within this belief in High John the Conqueror. I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that anyone even attempting to work with the spirit or even possess the root from a sacred standpoint must first understand that this is much bigger than you. That you are not just approaching the spirit of the root. You are approaching a spirit that transcends your existence, and a spirit with immense capabilities because so many people poured their belief into the spirit. It still exists. High John the Conqueror is still very much alive. I just think that for many people, they have been unsuccessful in their attempt to truly have a relationship with the spirit, or with the wrong people, which I will get into later, and they're not approaching this spirit with the respect that he deserves. If Black Americans, specifically from a Black American cultural standpoint, had any version of said spirit or deity that represented a trickster who was also a waymaker outside of what some people might say Jesus, I would definitely have to give it to High John the Conqueror, because outside of the capabilities of Spirit God, okay, because if you know anything about the Spirit God is there to just simply guide you, not materialize. The spirit of High John the Conqueror is believed to materialize, like things will actually happen in material form in your life from belief in working with this spirit. So it is beyond the spirit guide, okay? Or this is something real that people really believe in. It's still very much so believed in to this day. There's no easy way to walk into saying this other than this, in my opinion, in my very strong opinion, this is a spirit that is only for Black Americans. High John the Conqueror is in that category where this is a spirit that was manifest and materialized solely for the plight and for the existence of Black people. If you are utilizing the root for your own cultural or medicinal purposes, that's your own business. Okay, that's not what I'm talking about, because outside of the root being utilized in traditional Black American practices, it is also utilized in indigenous practices as well. So I'm not saying that only Black people have the right to work with the root, High John the Conqueror, in the spiritual sense. No, I'm talking about the spirit that is said to believe to live inside of the root. It's the intention of what you're doing that is the catalyst of everything. Especially when it comes to anything ritual or spiritual, your intention is always the catalyst of that. So, no, I only believe that this is for Black American people because there's evidence of that this was a spirit who specifically came from Africa here to assist people out who were Black on the plantations. Now, there could even be this argument. Now, this is where I might play a little devil's advocate right here. Now, there could be this argument that High John the Conqueror was only or probably worked a lot stronger for people who experienced that hardship. I actually believe that. Not the part where we can't, as the descendants can't work with the spirit of High John. I do believe that our ancestors had a much deeper access to the spirit than we ever will have. And I think that we just have to understand that. We might have to just swallow that as much as we might love or want to love the spirit of High John the Conqueror. But when I think about it, I mean, it's only right when you really think about it, because we don't share the same experience. We will never go through that again. From the legend, the way the legend tells it, this, High John came here specifically for our ancestors. Because that was their lived experience, they're going to share a different type of intimacy with the belief in High John the Conqueror, as well as the effect of working with that spirit. I believe that we do. I believe that High John will still work for us, but maybe not as powerful as some of the things that it might have done for our ancestors. But hey, that's just the belief that I have. Again, if you don't agree with that, you are more than welcome to grill me in the comments. I love to read it. It's one of my favorite things to do is read the comments. So please, let's talk about it if you have an opposing view, or even if you agree with me. I love it when you all agree with me too. I don't, I don't put my hand over anybody's mouth when it comes to the comments. You can say how you feel, just be respectful, right? I know for a fact that some people who are in my audience of Caucasians are not going to agree with what I'm saying right now, and that's fine too. But I do want to say this: like, this is again one of those spirits that's just not for you all, and how a spirit that was here for enslaved Black Americans, how that spirit got etched into the spiritual practices of a Caucasian person. I don't understand that. Maybe someone also in the comments could explain to me how that could be so. So again, for those of you all that are listening, the products that you buy, they are going to work. So again, if someone makes you a high John oil and it works, that's not the same as having an intimacy with this spirit, being able to summon this spirit for his assistance or his help. If that makes sense, like, the trick is going to work because it's designed to work. And as always, I love all my listeners, all demographics of my listeners, and I say these things to my Caucasian listeners to help educate you as to why you say things like you are working with the spirit of Kai John the Conqueror, how it can come off very offensive to one of your Black friends or members of your spiritual house or group.
Find all 3 scoops inside specially marked Kellogg's cereal boxes and see Disney and Pixar's Toy Story 5 only in theaters.
Power, heat, size, an impossible triumph. Now, we broke through.
Why they might be very offended hearing a white identifying person say those things, especially if they are a person who listens to this podcast and they know the history behind the experience. So I think it's important for all of us, and this is not just for my Caucasian listeners, for everyone at this point now, that it's important for you to know the history of something or to know the depths of something before you just jump into it, or because you might have watched a few seconds about something on TikTok, and this is why I make long videos like this. Sometimes I might ramble on a topic, but one thing that I want to be credited for is I want to be very thorough with all of you that are my listeners, because for some of you, I am like a teacher for you. Some of you may not have access, or you might not be in a place where having someone to mentor you in the realm of Hinduism is applicable to your life. So you listen to podcasts like this, you listen to people like me, and we serve as stand-in teachers until Spirit provides you with what you need. So one thing about me is I always want to be very thorough. So if you were to say that you got this information from Papa Seer, you got it in a nice package with everything that you needed inside of it. Okay? So again, even for those of us that look like each other, we have to approach this spirit with a lot of respect. You have to look beyond this is just some amulet or some trinket. You are tapping into a belief system that's in your bloodline, and a belief system that was transcending before your birth. This was around before you. This predates you. This is going to be around. It's not just an amulet or a trinket. Again, this is a very powerful and sacred belief system. And I think for those of you who may have attempted to form intimacy with the spirit of High John the Conqueror and failed, maybe revisit that relationship from this place of, when I hold this root, or when I possess this root, inside of this root lives a piece of the spirit of High John. When you purchase the root, purchase it with that type of intimacy, with that type of intent, that you're not just buying, a pound or however High John roots, but you are purchasing a vessel that holds a very, very powerful spirit. You are holding something sacred that was a piece of Black American history and still is to this day. I think if we were to revisit it with that type of respect, some of you who may have had poor results in the past, you might find that things are going to change for you. And those of you who might have a relationship now, maybe just incorporate this into your belief system and see how much more or how greater the results or how much more intimacy can be gained from that relationship with High John the Conqueror. And for those of you who may not be Black American, and again, this is just my opinion, I can't stop you from doing anything, but I'm standing on my opinion. Even though I still feel like this is not a spirit for you, there's nothing wrong with learning the history of something so that you can also be utilized as a vessel to offer education to your demographic or to walk with the knowledge of something that you might be particularly interested in. I mean, you're not listening to this podcast for no reason. So, I try my best to be for whoever I need to be for in these moments while still standing and holding true to the things that I believe in. As with anything in the Hindu tradition, there are multiple different methods of doing something. So there are many different ways of working with the spirit of High John the Conqueror, summoning the spirit, or working with the root High John the Conqueror. What I can say is common about each method is the spirit of High John the Conqueror is always summoned with some form of cologne or perfume, or there is a alcohol that is associated with the ritual or the trick that is fixed. Those are some of the commonalities that each method shares. And of course, I do not offer my own personal methods on air because that is a space where I like to restrict that access to only my students. So we would have to form a different relationship to have that conversation. But I do like to offer what I can on air with respect to the practice. So I am going to end here, but I do want to offer these closing words that, it is very important for us to hold our traditions and our beliefs sacred. What might seem as something that may be minuscule to you, what might seem as Welcome to the Hoodoo and Chill Podcast, the #1 hoodoo and spirituality-based podcast, bringing awareness to African American spirituality in a wide range of thought-provoking topics. I am Papa Seer, your host, your narrator, and your storyteller. Before the show begins, make sure you're subscribed or following the show so you don't miss out on any episodes. And as always, donations of love keep our podcast alive and give us the ability to upgrade the show, enhance our content, and most importantly, do what we love. You can use any link in the description to send your donation of love today. Now, let's start the show.
All right. I see y'all done came back now. No problem. I'll tell you another story. Go on, gather around there. Go on, gather around. I'll tell you a story about Uncle Monday. Now, this here story comes from my friend down there in Florida. Uncle Monday was his name. That was the name he told the people. You see, he was a great African medicine man who was captured, sold into slavery. He escaped from a plantation down in Georgia, made his way into the Indian country that is now Florida, where he performed a ceremony for the Indians. Uncle Monday drummed, danced until his face grew long and terrible. till his arms and legs began to change, until his skin grew thick and scaly, and his voice came like thunder. And from Blue Sink Lake came alligator voices to answer his own. 1,000 gators swept up to the banks of the lake and made a lane between their ranks. Uncle Monday glided majestically upon the water between the lines of thundering gators, and they disappeared after. That was the way he left the lane and changed himself into an alligator. His home is still in the Blue Sea, but sometimes he returns as a man to cast a spell on folks. When Uncle Monday comes back, he lives in a tiny hovel on the shore of Blue Sea. On one such visit, he heard of a medicine woman named Old Judy. Old Judy was jealous of Uncle Monday. She bragged that he wasn't as good a doctor as she was. She could undo any spell he cast and throw it back on him. Uncle Monday heard about her boasting and said, "That foolishness of tongues is higher than mountains." So one late afternoon, Judy asked her grandson to fix up a bowl so she could go fishing. This was startling to her family. Judy had given up fishing years before, you see, saying she couldn't sit on fishing ponds, had a red bugs and mosquitoes eating up her old carcass. Because Blue Sink is bottomless. You see, there is no bottom. Only a few steps from the shore. Folks tried to stop her, but she cut them short. "I just got to go," she said. "So hush up, John." By the time Judy got to the lake, it was nearly dark. See, she didn't like to walk through the brush after dark. But somehow she got to the center of her mind and get up and run. Looked like she felt the dark slipping up on her and grabbing a hold of her like a mom. When the dark was finally there for good, she got so scared she lost use of all her legs. Then she heard a wind start up the hill a little way off and come rushing down upon her angrily. In the twinkling of her eye, she found herself falling into the lake, and she was so afraid. She'd always been afraid of water and darkness, even when he was 7 days. And the two things together were more terrible than she could find words to tell afterwards. Both of these elements held her in their claws. She was terrible in the Blue Sea, and she could not get out. You see, Judy was afraid to struggle for fear that she would slip off into the deeps. Some foul vomit might be attached to her and eat her. When she began to get to her feet, she had no power in her limbs. It was all she could do to keep her head above water. Finally, she screamed for help. The moment she left her lips, something huge hovered above her head and said, "Hush! Your bragging, your lying tongue has brought you here. Here you will stay until I decide for you to leave." Then a brilliant beam of light fell clear across the lake like a flaming sword. The light ray pointed deep at her like a monster spear. She saw Uncle Monday walking across the lake toward her, and behind him a swarm horde of alligators like an army behind their leader. He walked down the shimmering band of light to where Judy lay on the edge of the lake about to drown and die of terror. "I put you here," Uncle Monday said, "and here you will stay until you bow down and acknowledge me." Then the light began to fade and Uncle Monday was gone. There was nothing left but a huge alligator. It lay motionless beside her, so close that she could not help touching him when she breathed.
old Judy fought against giving in to Uncle Monday's command, but fear rode her down. As soon as she began to beg for mercy, she saw a torch moving down the hill towards the river and heard her grandson calling her. So she made a sound and he found her. Her folks kept telling Judy that she had suffered a stroke falling in the lake and imagined the rest of it, but Judy knew better. To the day of her death, she swore that it really happened. She gave up her voodoo practice, and when she got the back use of her legs, she claimed it was Uncle Monday who put her on her feet again. Uncle Monday still walks around as a man, but when he is not a man, he big as an alligator that lives in the lake. When he goes to join the waters, there's turmoil and battling all night long. The huge roots are playing a homage to their king.
Uncle Monday is a short story excerpt from Rawhead Bloody Bones, African American Tales of the Supernatural.
Thank you.